Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I am here with the rest of my June wrap up. Basically books I read in June that did not fall in the project I was doing with Shannon over at That's So Poe, and the project was Great Minds Think Alike. So if you didn't catch that video, I will link it down below in the description of the video. But let's get started because I read quite a bit in June. The first book that I finished in June was a reread. I don't reread very often, but when I do, it's because the book's is really good. So this is Temporada de Huracanes by Fernanda Melchor. In English, it's Hurricane Season by the same author, but I did read it in Spanish this time. The first time I read the book was in English. This time was in Spanish, and I read it with my friend who lives in South Korea, and it was great to kind of read it with somebody else, dissect it. I was kind of behind on my reading while I was reading with her, but it was great to hear her thoughts. This book had kind of been on her mind a lot, and so getting to discuss it, I think, was great for both of us. I should tell you what this book is about. It's about a witch in a remote village in Mexico that is found by the river, dead. And then every chapter is told from a different point of view, and little chapter by chapter you get the full picture of what happened here. So it is very graphic at times, content warnings for misogyny, sexual assault, rape, transphobia, homophobia. It is really an indictment of a lot of kind of the worst in kind of rural Mexican masculinity. And it's a really powerful book, and even though it deals with such heavy topics, if you can handle the topics, it is very much worth a read. The next book on my list was an arc I got for free thanks to the author. This is a self-published book. The book is The Crooked Little Pieces by Sophia Lambton. This is volume 1, so there will be further volumes of this story, and I thought the writing was exquisite. Like, the writing does make you read every single word. You can't like skim ahead or anything like that. Sometimes in some books I kind of tend to focus on the dialogue and kind of just skim the other parts. This book forced me to read every single word in the story. On the other hand, I felt like there was some editing that was needed in the story. The book is set in between the world wars, and you're following a father. You start off following a father who has these twin daughters, and kind of how he's parenting them, and you know what's coming. They're in mainland Europe, and then they move to Britain. And so we're watching them as he parents these girls, kind of knowing what's coming in the background. But the story is mainly about this family. The mom is there, but the mom seems, we don't know what's up with the mom. She's not present. She's there, but she's not present. And so the girls are basically being raised by their father only. And that part I felt like was the part that needed some editing, because there's a big turning point in the story that happens, and that is when you get into more of the girls, what's happening with them, their internal lives, their emotional lives, everything with them. Once the story gets more into them, it picks up speed. It's still a slow book. It's a book that's more about kind of mood and environment, with the characterization and the plot really being secondary. And so if you like slow moving, atmospheric books set in between the world wars, this will definitely be the book for you. I am kind of interested by the end. By the time I finished reading this book, I felt invested. I really did feel invested in these girls and what's going to happen with them as the war continues. So I'll say that I'm invested in the girls, and I think that I hope that the right readers find this book. The next book I finished was another reread. It was really nice to actually start a new project with Shannon and then kind of fold in some rereads. This was Prime Meridian by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. It's a short novella set in Mexico City in sometime in the future. We don't know exactly. We know it's the future because our main character wants to go to Mars. It's her lifelong dream that has been derailed because her mother got sick while she was in college and she had to leave college to go take care of her mother. Now her mother has passed away and she's trying to kind of live life, figure things out while now being behind all of her peers. It is to me, I love this. This is a great book to start off reading Silvia Moreno-Garcia if you've never read her. And her newest book is coming out this month. So it's a great time to pick up this novella if you want to. It'll give you a great taste of her writing and whether or not she's a writer you want to keep reading. For me, this was just fantastic. This is one of my favorite books by one of my favorite writers, so I love it. The next book I finished was Dead, Dead Girls. This is a Harlem Renaissance mystery. This is the first one in the series by Nekesa, Afia. And I love mysteries. I like cozy mysteries. I like urban mysteries. I like all mysteries, really. Though it's historical and set in New York during the Harlem Renaissance. You start off with a girl, our main character, who is black, lives in New York, and she had been kidnapped when she was young. She escaped that kidnapping and became a kind of local celebrity. People know who she is because of this very famous kidnapping. Now, though, girls have started disappearing in her neighborhood, and she is enlisted to help the police kind of deal with the neighborhood, because this is the black community and the cops are white, and so they need the help of an insider to try to figure out what is happening, because the police are not trusted and people won't really talk to them. This was a solid read. There was enough in here that I want to keep reading. The start, like the first half of the book, to me was really, really great, and then it kind of slows down because the mystery becomes kind of a backstory, and we're delving more into the main character, who she is. These are all things that a first book in the series kind of has to do. In this case, I felt like it really slowed down the plot and made me less interested as I was reading along than the first half. However, I am so interested to see where this series goes. I'm going to keep reading in this series. In fact, the second book in the series just came out. Okay, next book I read was Bad Mexicans, Race, Empire, and Revolution in the Borderlands by Lytle Hernández. This is a nonfiction book that as soon as I heard about it, I knew I wanted to read. So part of what Hernández is arguing here is something that historians of the borderlands, of like the Mexican-American experience, have been arguing for some time, which is that in order to really understand American history, you have to know Mexican history as well. Like those two don't separate very easily. And here the setting is the Mexican Revolution, or actually the decades before the Mexican Revolution, during the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz in Mexico. There's these groups of men that are in opposition to Porfirio Diaz, but they are run out of the country, end up in the U.S., and then because of the U.S.-Mexico relationship, there's this complexity of how these men are hunted down both by the Mexican authorities and American authorities, all while really building the foundation of what will be the Mexican Revolution. So this is really, really fantastic history, really well written. Even if you're not into reading nonfiction, this would be one that, if the history interests you, you should pick it up. We spent a lot of time talking about Texas, California, Illinois, just different parts of where some of these men end up and how the legal system in the U.S. and in these states interact with the Mexican government. Um, all along, also primarily focused on men. That was my one critique, is that clearly the women in the lives of these men and in the movement leading up to the revolution are very important. But the story is about these group of men in particular. So there we go. That is just one of those things that in nonfiction, the historian, the author, has to pick and choose what they're going to be focusing on. And now that I've read this story, I want to know more about these particular women as well. But anyways, I'm not an expert in Mexican history, but I was so interested in this story, and that's why I think it's accessible to a wider audience. The next book that I finished was As Long as Grass Grows, The Indigenous Fight for Environmental Justice, From Colonization to Standing Rock by Dina, Gilio-Whitaker. This is another fantastic nonfiction. This one in particular is geared towards a wider audience. There is quite a bit of theory at the beginning of the book, so if you've already read a lot of nonfiction, this will not be a problem necessarily for you. But if you're new to nonfiction, the beginning, there's such a few chapters in this book that are so theory heavy that they might be a burden. But if you can get through those, there is such a fantastic history. And the way that more current history is woven in to the telling of this story is really, really fantastic. I was so impressed with all of this. I learned new things, and it makes a really important argument that indigenous communities have been left out of environmental history. And really that's what needs to be centered as we look at the history of the environment and the history of the human relationship with the environment. Native communities have a lot to tell us, and it's not just about non-indigenous scholars going into these communities and taking this information from them. It's about giving them the opportunities to tell their stories and to just listen and read the stories that indigenous communities can tell us, because it is a complex history of the human relationship to the environment, and no one is really better positioned to tell those stories and to tell that history than indigenous communities. This was fantastic. The way that particular histories and moments in history are used here to tell the story. And it's a reminder that the U.S. relationship, or the relationship with the American government with indigenous communities, is that of colonization. It's colonization happening all around us. And as such, those of us that care about this need to, one, understand what is happening and become participants and help the communities that we care about. So this is a fantastic book. The next book that I finished was Obsession in Death. This is book number 40 in the In Death series. Whoa, I hit number 40. It just hit me. This is a series by J.D. Robb, aka Nora Roberts. This was one of the books in the series that I'm like, oh, it hasn't aged very well. I liked the overall mystery in the story because it involves somebody who is extremely obsessed with our main character, Eve Dallas. This series is set in like a futuristic New York with a futuristic cop who solves crimes, along some of her famous friends, not so famous friends, and her very, very wealthy spouse. So in this one, I like cases where we spend quite a bit of time following our main character, her personal life and her personal relationships. But there was a lot of things that didn't hold up. Like, the main character is described as mixed race, and the wording that gets used over and over again to talk about the main character, I felt like, no, this is not how we talk about people's skin, it's racist. And just other bits here and there where I was like, ooh, cringe phrase. Ooh, that didn't age well. And so overall, I had to give it a 2-star rating. Like, it's not one that I would necessarily recommend. I'm gonna keep reading in this series, but it was very so often you come across one of these installments in the series that's just like, ooh, no. So that was this one for me. Okay, a couple more books here. Oh, actually, just one more book that I haven't yet talked about, and that is Café con Lychee. This is by Emery Lee, and I wanted to pick this up as soon as I heard about it. It is a young adult, and I haven't been into young adult books lately, but this is an interracial teen romance in which one of the teens is Asian American and another is Latinx, and it's LGBT. These are two boys, one who is out and one who is not, and seeing how these different experiences shape them. In addition, both boys, their parents run cafes that center their ethnicity, and but they're kind of rival cafes, so it's an enemies to lovers. I think some people are not going to like that aspect of it. In addition, one of the characters is very prickly. He kind of has a chip on his shoulder, and like he hasn't like fully recognized the ways in which he is loved and supported, and that's okay. Like a lot of times I was sitting there reading and I'm thinking like, kid, you need a reality check. Like your life's not that bad. No, not everyone's against you. But I also recognize that when you're a teenager, that's a very common feeling, to feel like it's you against everyone. Like your family doesn't understand you, your friends don't understand you, and it just feels that way. So the so it didn't bother me, but I think some people who don't like some of these more prickly teens will not like it. I enjoyed it. There were parts that kind of didn't necessarily entirely work for me, but for the most part, it was just a really enjoyable book with a lot of discussion of like coffee shops, family, LGBTQIA issues. I had fun reading it, so I'm happy that I got to read it. And I believe that is it. Yes, all the other books that I read in June fall into the category of my project that I did with Shannon, Great Minds Think Alike. So I loved all of those books. Check it out if you haven't. Tell me what you were reading this month that you would recommend, because you know I'm always trying to expand my TBR. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!